Hello, everybody. Let's delve into a timeline of history. To understand history, we have to know how timelines are calculated. We have to try to understand the difference between CE and BCE. We will also learn to calculate time periods in history. What is CE and BCE? CE is also called Common Era. We are now in the Common Era, 2024 CE. CE is calculated from the time of Jesus Christ, when he was born. Earlier calendars were specific to empires and emperors. Each emperor set his own calendar. Julius Caesar wanted to put a stop to this, and he said a calendar should start and continue forever. No resetting of calendars. And he was a little before the time of Jesus Christ, and that is when calendars started getting dated, as we see today, and so they were called the Julian calendar. It coincided with the time of Jesus Christ. CE was earlier called AD, that is Anno Domini, which means in the year of the Lord meaning the Christ. Now, after this dating, we have to think about time periods before CE, which was before the time of Jesus Christ. That is called BCE. It used to be called BC as before Christ. Now it is BCE, which means before Common Era. To be accurate, Jesus Christ was born between 3 and 6 BCE, but we'll approximate it to 1 CE to understand timelines, as his life started from 1 CE. Because dates were not very accurate during that period in history, we don't know precisely when he was born. So CE is dated in the increasing order, starting with 1 CE, 2 CE, 3 CE, and so on. We are now in 2024 CE. 2024 years have passed since then, since the time of the Christ. But what about history? Wasn't there any history, any civilization before that? The Roman Empire, Greek Empire, Egyptian, Sumerian, they all existed long before CE. Some were 3000 years before that, some 5000, some even more. So how do we date them? We have to date them too. When do we start? From what period do we start in history? We find more and more civilizations as we excavate and dig for more. So BCE is dated in the backward direction, which means 1 CE, before 1 CE is 1 BCE. The year before 1 BCE was 2 BCE, and the year before 2 BCE was 3 BCE, and so on, which means 100 BCE occurred before 50 BCE, which occurred before 1 BCE, and then came 1 CE, then came 2 CE, and then the number goes on counting in the forward direction. This is similar to the mathematical number line that you see, where positive integers go on as 1, 2, 3, 4, and negative integers minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. Let's look at it. Minus 100 is less than minus 50, while 100 is more than 50. But the major difference between the mathematical number line and the time period in history is the number 0. 0 exists on the mathematical number line, but not in time period in history. Why is this? There is a story for that too. Since the Romans started the calendar, the Julian calendar, numericals were in Roman. And we all know Roman numbers don't have the 0. They never thought of the 0. So numbers started from 1. Started from 1 CE forwards, 1 BCE backwards. 0 was introduced in India between 5th and 7th century CE by Indian polymath Brahmagupta and Aryabhat. This was then taken over by Al-Khwarizmi, Persian polymath, somewhere in the 9th century, which was then followed in Europe in 11th or 12th century. I'm not very accurate with the dates, but this is around the period that it spread to the European world and then to the rest of the world. So zero was not known at the time that CE began, and hence timeline in history does not have the zero. Now here in the slide, we will look at two different countries and their histories and their civilization at the same time. If you look at the Indian civilization, Indus Valley civilization started from 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. That was 700 years. And if you notice, I have written 2600 before 1900 because this is BCE. We are dating time in the reverse direction. The numbers are written backwards. 2600 was before 1900 in BCE. We came to know about Indus Valley civilization through ruins and excavations. Later, Aryans came to India around 1500 BCE, that is 400 years after the Indus Valley civilization perished. We don't know how it perished. There are theories, but they are only theories. Aryans came from Central Asia, and it marks the beginning of Vedic period for around 1000 years. We have records of what Aryans did because Aryans wrote many books, Upanishads, Vedas, and hence it's called Vedic period, the epics. So that's recorded history. Later we had Gupta and Mauryan dynasties and so on, so forth. During that time BCE changed to CE. It was a time of Roman emperor in the West, the time of Jesus Christ. Parallel to the Aryan period was the time of the Greek Empire and so on. If you look at a parallel time period in UAE, the Aryan period matches with the Iron Age in UAE. And then there is the arrival of Islam, which was at the time of the Chola Empire in India. Now if you look at this date, 1498, that is in UAE timeline, which starts the Portuguese era. Does this date ring a bell? Think about it. Isn't this date important in Indian history? A Portuguese explorer came to India in Kerala on the shores of Calicut, Vasco da Gama. So what do you see here? It means the Portuguese king sent out sailors to the east to explore new lands. One sailor came to UAE, the other to India, and perhaps many other sailors moved to different places. You have to understand that UAE was formed in 1971. We are talking about a time period before that. We are talking about what happened in that part of the world, which was not called UAE then. We are comparing history to find a common thread. The common thread here in 1498 is the Portuguese king sending out his sailors to east. Do you see something else that is common? Yes, the British Protectorate put in 1820 in UAE. Wasn't that the time when India was a British colony? UAE was a British protectorate. Can you see something else here? Pause the video and think about it. Okay. You can connect history of different places to a common thread if you observe the timeline. Now the next thing I want you to notice is Aryans came from Central Asia, which is to the west of India. Islamic dynasties came from Persia, Turkey, again Central Asia. The British came from the west. They all came from the west of India or the northwest of India. Why didn't any empire come from south or come through the east? Can you think about it? Why? It is not because other empires were not interested, because Genghis Khan from east, from Mongolia, went all the way till Europe, conquering lands, but he didn't come to India. He didn't cross over to India. Why? If you notice, India is a peninsula, the south is covered with water on three sides. So one has to make a very difficult route, travel by water. So in the times of the Aryans, there were no ships. So nobody could make that route. It was not an easy route. People die on the way through water. Land was the best route. So why didn't somebody come from the north or the northeast? Yes, the Himalayan ranges. The Himalayan ranges prevented any dynasty from China or Mongolia or Tibet from the eastern side crossing over to India. The northwestern side was open land, and that's the reason migrations, influx, colonization, etc. happened from the western side. If you notice, if you look at the history of any place, you will see that the history is very much connected to the geography. The geography decides the history of a place. The geography just doesn't decide the kind of food or the clothes you wear. It decides the migration patterns. Just like animals follow a migration pattern, following the best route available to the best options available, so do humans in the past. That is not true of today because we have advanced a lot, but in ancient times, humans looked for the easiest route to go to a land which was in plenty. You can look for such history, migration patterns in other civilizations. Ask questions. The best way to study history is asking questions, finding out the answers. This is the map of India, Africa, and Europe to understand the slide written before. Central Asia, Persia, Turkey, and UK have been marked here for you to understand the migration pattern of humans starting from the Aryan period to the very recent British times. If you see, they were all to the west and northwest of India. This is a timeline drawn on a number scale similar to a mathematic number scale showing India and UAE in parallel. If you study drawing a timeline like this, marking the dates BCE and CE and mark your periods, then it becomes easy to study history, easy to remember the dates. If you're studying beginning of Vedic period, draw the timeline, mark the Vedic period in there. Draw the timeline, mark the different periods. It becomes very easy to memorize because graphical representation is easier to memorize than written text. Everything that you write, if you can present in a pictorial form, it becomes much easier to study. That is my idea behind showing this slide, this video itself, to make history a little easier, to remember the dates easier. This is a timeline of different empires in different parts of the world. If you see, it's easy to study if you make notes like this. You will find many such pictures on the net, more in detail. Look for something that matches your study requirements and try to form one yourself. As you draw, you will memorize it better. I have created some activities and questions for you to answer. If it's interesting, you can try to answer these questions. Try to explore. History is very interesting if you learn it like a story. Do not try to study by rote. Try to learn like a story and it becomes easy and interesting. The answers to the previous slide are provided here in yellow. I will go to the last column, which talks about if BCE has a beginning and an end. BCE is started from year 1, as I have explained before. There is no end. We can go back into the past and go on dating history. If you look at the calculation, the next question, how many years before current times did Aryans come to India? If you see, it's 1500 BCE and today we are in 2024. We can approximate it to 2000 years. 2000 plus 1500 is 3500 years. This is how you calculate the time period approximately. And the most ancient civilization recorded in history so far right now is Mesopotamia. As more and more excavations go on, as historians try to dig faster and more into the past, we'll find more civilizations. Try to answer these questions too. They are very simple. They have been explained before. The answers to put the dates in increasing order. If you see, BCE should be written first, the largest number first, then the smaller one. When you come to CE, you go in the normal counting order. And why isn't there a year 0 between CE and BCE? I have explained it earlier in short, but a detailed explanation is provided here. Romans made the first modern calendar. As I said, it was a Julian calendar. It was called Julian calendar, but 0 was not in the Roman numerals. So, since it came later from India to the Arab world and then to Europe, 0 was not in the earlier calendars. But now the calendar is not called Julian calendar, it's called the Gregorian calendar because sometime in 582 CE, Pope Gregory made some corrections to the calendar. This is regarding the leap year. There's a whole new story behind it. We know that leap years are once every 4 years, but every 100 years there is no leap year. But every 400 years there is a leap year. So there was no leap year in 1900, but there was a leap year in year 2000. So after 1600, the next leap year after centuries is after 4 centuries. So this was a correction made by Pope Gregory to fix the number of dates that go up and down based on the Earth's revolution around the Sun. It's not perfectly 365 or 366 days. Let's do some critical thinking. You can look for two parallel ages events in history, find out similarities or differences, and ask questions. You may not have the answers, but you should have questions and then look for the answers.